Tennis coaching has a huge problem. Tennis coaches can't coach. Welcome, as always, to my tennis coaching podcast. Apologies, I don't have my microphone with me today. I'm in the car. I am away on Monday morning, and I've got something on my chest that I want to get off. So this is going to be a bit of a rant. So a little bit different than my previous podcast. I will stick it on YouTube as well. But yeah, I've been working a lot recently with some tennis coaches. And whether that be in a mentoring capacity, whether it be to day-to-day capacity or coach education capacity. And a question I keep asking coaches is, what do you see? What do you see what's happening in front of you with players in various situations and stuff? The amount of time, and I would say 95% of the time, all they see is technique. Late on contact, back foot hasn't come back enough, didn't get the racket back early enough, off balance, follow through was too short, didn't generate enough spin. It's crazy, like how, just in my camera, how little tennis coaches actually see. And I did a workshop last week, and I did a constraint-led approach presentation, and I said in that presentation, like, to be a great coach at anything, you're a great detective. You need to know where the player wants to be or wants to go, what they need to be able to achieve that, what they have now, and you've got to fill in the gaps. From a detective point of view, it's like a crime, and you've got the crime scene, and you've got to investigate. You've got to do the questioning. You've got to look around for clues, and you've got to probe and try and find some questions and some answers, and then you start coming with solutions. And the amount of time where it's just picking out a random technical point, and that's going to fix everything. Or they may look at it from an analytics point of view and say, oh yeah, well, we're not going to the backhand as much. Yeah, well, we're going to fix that. But no questioning of the player, no understanding of what performance is. And to quote Mark Bennett, like, performance is a behavior. And the amount of time where coaches have worked on technique, and it's generally a case the player's nervous. So if player's nervous, they see less information. They take in less information. The less information they take in, the less opportunities for action or affordances that they see. The less affordances they see, the more likely they are to pick a wrong opportunity for action, and that's where the error comes in. But coaches just don't seem to understand that, and it's something I've been playing around in my head for a couple of weeks now, and I've been bothering friends like Matt Wiggin of saying, like, are we in coach education guilty of this problem? Because we just deliver content, we deliver practices or drills or frameworks. We just give coaches what to coach. We don't actually teach them how to coach. And how to coach is a fine art. Like tonight, I'm about to go into the center and do some sessions tonight. I've got to be really attuned to my player. I need to understand where they're at today, what they have in the moment, and I've got to try and help them as best I can with what they bring. I've no idea what they're going to bring. And I've no idea when I put a constraint in place, a rule, a task, whatever you want to call it, a drill, I've no idea how they're going to interact. So it's not so much the content or the exercise or drill, it's what happens next. That's what coaching is. Like the first session we've got this evening, we're going to work on serve, and we're going to do a little bit of differential learning. So trying to get the player to serve from different areas of the court to see if we can get some adaptability with the serve. No idea how the player's going to interact. So I've got nothing else planned apart from that first exercise. I'm just going to get the player to serve from, I'm just going to keep it narrow today. So service line, orange baseline, green baseline, and further back. So four areas. And I'm just going to look at what happens. And ask yourself this question, and I've been this coach as well, where you go into a session and, okay, you've got your close practice or your first practice. Then you've got your progression and your second practice. Then you've got the other one. Then you've got your other one. And you've got like 3 or 4 drills that you're going to go through. No matter what happens on the court, whether the player achieves success or not, you're going to go through the 4. Generally speaking, if they're not achieving it, you'll just stay longer on practice 1 or drill 1. You won't actually progress. You'll just move on no matter what. So if they are achieving success, you probably stay there probably a little bit too long, because you probably have like a 10-minute allocation for that practice. So no matter what happens, you'll do your 10 minutes. And I really struggle with this now as a coach educator. I really struggle because, like, well, it might take a player 2 goes and they become stable. Then I've got to destabilize them. I've got to create something, an imbalance, to make them find something different, and a different way of doing it. And I watch coaches over the past week or 2, and the amount of time they just stay in a stable position, and the players get bored. The players get so bored of just doing the same thing over and over again. The idea of repetition with repetition is absolutely still around. Yeah, we'll just do it loads. We'll just practice it loads, and that's where skill develops, because it gets better. And you could see it in the players' behaviour. So they start to lose focus. And what happens when you lose focus? The performance drops. What happens when you're bored? The performance drops. What happens when you're not motivated? The performance drops. And as soon as the performance drops, the coach jumps in, and then you're not trying hard enough, you're not working hard enough, there's no effort, you don't problem solve. When things get tough, you give up. It's not the fact that it's getting tough, it's the fact that the kid's bored out their mind of doing this mundane practice. Because the coach has the idea of, I've got to get the reps in. We need lots of volume. We need lots of repetition with repetition. Same thing over and over again. If I do it enough, it'll get better. That's how skill evolves. That's not coaching. Coaching is not just setting up a practice and taking a step back. And I've talked about this on the podcast a lot. Like, I get that thrown at me a lot. Oh, you just set up a practice, they don't say anything. Well, if you actually look, I'm actually manipulating the practice quite a lot. I might not be shouting explicit instructions, because again, I want the player to find solutions. I'm not telling the player what to do. I'm manipulating the game for them to find solutions. That's what coaching, in my opinion, is. And I've just watched again a few more presentations from a Grand Slam Coaches Conference. And there's a misrepresentation of constraint-led coaching in there again today. Of, oh, it's a buzzword. Oh, this is how you constrain a game or a task. And it's just a practice. No idea, well, no mention of ecological psychology or ecological dynamics. No mention of the methodology behind the constraint. Like, the reason why we do it. It's just, oh, it's implicit learning. They'll just learn. They'll just magically learn. Again, something that gets thrown at me quite a lot. Oh, players just learn what to do, don't they? Yeah, so you just set up the practice, and then the player gets it. No, because even within a constraint-led approach exercise or practice, there's lots of variability. And sometimes the players, they look at different opportunities for action, affordances. They'll get attracted to the wrong affordance, because I can't constrain everything, because then you over-constrain it. So then what I've got to do is guide the player to the more attractive and more efficient and effective affordances to look at. And it's a constant battle. As I say battle, it's a constant eyes on what's happening here. Like, how can I get that little bit better? How can I get the player to, or how can I guide the player to the right information? And coaches just don't know. Like, they don't know what to look for. They don't know what to be attuned to. And I think I keep coming back to this. Like, is it in coach ed? Is it in coach education? Like, are we just giving the coaches a plan, a linear structure? This is what you do. Warm up, observation analysis, close practice, progression, put it back into a game, done. Okay, well, if this goes wrong, it must be a reading issue or a ready issue or a reaction issue. If this goes wrong, it must be a contact issue. Even though we don't know, because again, I had a great message. I love getting messages on Instagram and stuff. A coach messaged me last night saying that their players were struggling with a certain situation and they were encouraging a movement solution. was it right? And I was like, I've no idea. Like, until I see the ball and the player, I have no idea. No clue. And they were a bit taken aback. I was like, well, I don't know, because one, I don't know the player. Two, I don't know the situation, the environment. And three, I don't know what the task was. So if I don't know the three constraints, I don't know what movement solutions were available, and the one they were taking, was there a better solution available? I have no idea. And I said to the coach, like, did you ask the player what information they were using? I'm like, no. I said, what were you basing it on then? He said, oh, what I seen. I was like, well, that's irrelevant. What you see and what the player sees are two different worlds. You need to see it through the eyes of the player. You need the information from the player. And then from there, you can start to manipulate your constraints or the practice or guide the player to a better solution. But until you know what information the player's using, you've no Scooby-Doo what's going on. You're just guessing. And you're just using your little handbook of technical phrases of, okay, get your body behind the ball, beat the bounce. Well, what if they can't beat the bounce? What if they don't need to beat the bounce? What if they can hit the ball on the run and not need to beat the bounce? It's just this stock, linear way of coaching. I don't know if it's because I look at it through a different lens these days and a different view of coaching, but I think the art of coaching is disappearing. Like the art of, or maybe it wasn't actually there, because a lot of stuff I've talked about is probably traditional coaching. Do we actually know how to coach? Do we know how to change behavior in a person and improve performance? Or do we know just how to set some practices up? Are we actually coaches? Or are we just game designers? And we design practices and games that might not improve or change performance? And I also see it from a slightly different lens as well, because I think tennis coaches, it's a tough gig. Like, we are generally professional coaches. We generally get paid. It's our job. But are we educated in the right way? Like, the amount of coaches who have no clue about perception. Like, they don't understand perception, how perception changes based on your mood. They have no clue how we link perception into action, and they decouple it. They have no clue what skill is. Again, I asked a question in the workshop last week. What's the difference between skill and technique? No one knew. No one knew. Do you know what the difference is between skill and technique? Leave down the comments if you believe you do. I don't think most coaches know what skill is. Most coaches think skill is technique, but they're two completely different things. And if the coaches don't know about perception and action, they don't know what skill is, how are they meant to teach it? How are they meant to guide players if they don't truly know what is going on with the body, how it uses information from the environment to take action? And it's not the information processing that we're used to with cognitive psychology. Again, great conversation this week with a fellow coach of mine, and they met with an ex-player, and he was saying, oh, we've met with an ex-player, he's in a cognitive psychology, you should meet up. I'm like, well, we have two different views on psychology, like an ecological and cognitive. Yeah, there's some similarities there. But my opinion, don't believe that we process information in a very structured way. Like, we don't look at something in terms of how we interact with a tennis ball, for example. Like, the 5 R's is classic, isn't it? Ready, read, react, racket, recover. That's a very linear process of hitting the ball. In ecological dynamics, we've got perception, action. We perceive the world and then we take action. And the action is the decision. Again, a presentation that I listened to today, the Grand Slam Coaches Conference, like, oh yeah, we've got perception, then we've got decision making, then we've got action. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. And you think about it, we've got 1.5 seconds or less time between touches in tennis. How can we have a real cognitive, linear decision making process in that short amount of time? And that's where you have the autonomous behavior. Oh yeah, but we've done it 10,000 times, so it just happens, Steve. Even though, again, look at it from an ecological lens, doesn't quite happen that way. We just self-organise and we interact with the world based on the task and the intention that we're given, our own physical constraints and the constraints in the environment as well. But again, how much do tennis coaches know? And you may say, yeah, but do tennis coaches need to know it? Like, if we're working with little tiny Steve, who's 5 down at club, do we really need to know all this science and psychology? Yeah, I think you do. I think you need to understand how human bodies, 1, learn movement, 2, how human body moves in terms of the interaction, the perception and the action. You need a little bit of understanding there, because that's what your job is, to teach that to players. If you don't understand it, then you have these traditional methods of decomposition of skill, where you just break it down and you work on one thing and you scale it down to a point where the player's standing still and you're drop feeding them. And from experience, we know that that doesn't transfer into matches. So I think tennis coaches do need it. And I think part of it, again, this is just all my opinion pieces, I'm just ranting in the car. Part of it is federations and organisations and governing bodies. I think they're scared to embrace ecological dynamics because it basically says you've been coaching the wrong way for a long time, in my opinion. Lines of players, waste of time. Basket feeding, some value, but not a lot of value. Explicit instructions, very little value. Isolating skill, very little value. Ecological dynamics, more transfer, lots of value, lots of learning, and it sticks. Okay, so why I've been coaching that way for 100 years? Why have we spent millions of billions of pounds on coach education and tennis programs and tennis initiatives if we've been coaching it back to front? Because we've actually just believed in some cognitive psychology. We've looked at cognitive psychology and we've not thought about, does cognitive psychology borrow or lend itself or live within a dynamic environment where you haven't got time, where you've got an ever-changing environment, when you've got an ever-changing, complex human being. If you look at a lot of, again, I'm not no sports scientist or psychologist, definitely not a doctorate in psychology. Someone asked me the other day, was I a doctor in psychology? I said, no. But you look at it like from that point of view, like cognitive psychology is all about thinking and taking time over tasks and reflection and really thinking deep and being quite thoughtful about processes. I haven't got time for that on tennis court. Less than 1.5 seconds. And I think that's where the disconnect is. And again, I understand why then cognitive psychologists get really wound up with people like me. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know. I'm a sports coach who is trying to apply some psychology onto a tennis player on a tennis court, trying to make sense of why things happen. And they've spent thousands of pounds on doctorates and masters, and they've spent years of their life studying, and fair play to them. And then I come around like, yeah, I'm not too sure that's right. I'm not too sure like you will have a very sort of understanding of, well, if the ball's going high and I'm stood here and my opponent stood there, then I need to put my left foot and right foot here and then hit the ball that way. Don't think it kind of works that way. Anyway, I'm going off a massive tangent here because I'm just ranting in the car. Hopefully there's some value in this rant and this podcast. Let me know in the comments. Do coaches know how to coach? Or do they know just what to coach? Are they just delivering content? Just to use a modern phrase, are they just delivering practices, product? Or are they actually coaching? Do coaches generally actually coach? I'm not too convinced. Until next time, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll speak to you soon.